Hot Springs Village Inside Out is a closer look at the greatness of Hot Springs Village, Arkansas and the surrounding areas. People, places, experiences. Hot Springs Village is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we engage in weekly conversations to explore Hot Springs Village Inside Out. Today's show is brought to you by Central Arkansas's favorite radio station, KVRE. Find them on the dial at 92.9 FM. Stream them live at kvre.com. RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village. The award-winning RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village is the largest real estate office inside the village with over 30 full-time agents and support staff. Visit them to learn more about this beautiful place to solve your real estate needs. Call them today at 1-800-364-9007. Find them online at explorehsv.com. They are RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village at 1-800-364-9007 or online at explorehsv.com. Ike Eisenhower State Farm. Ike and his award-winning team have been serving the insurance needs of folks all around Hot Springs Village since 1998. Ike has qualified for State Farm's President's Club, Chairman's Circle, and Hot Springs Village Insurance Agent of the Year. Call Ike Eisenhower State Farm today at 501-984-4100. That's 501-984-4100. Find them online at ikeeisenhower.net. Call them today for all your insurance needs because, like a good neighbor, Ike Eisenhower State Farm is there.
Here with Mr. Ken Unger today. I guess you could say we're kind of re-engineering the village. Ken, is that fair?
Yeah, I'd say so in a little bit of way here or there. Yeah, we're kind of re-engineering here as we find things for sure.
Well, we were talking before I hit the button, and I hadn't shared this with you before, but I have ashtrays that Cooper used to give out. And let's be frank, Cooper is the developer. I'm going from the 20-mile high view. Cooper is the developer. They built the city. They get to do it the way they want. But it may not be a permanent plan when we start, So when we start, we buy 15,000 acres, and then we build on a little more, and then we build on a little more, and then we give out ashtrays that say, where the Balboa golf course now exists, it says possible development here, Ponce golf course maybe. On the ashtray, it says possible.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So, when that meant Coronado was built, but they were going to call where Balboa is, which is a pretty big place, they were going to call that Ponce. Well, there certainly wasn't a East End water treatment plant. There wasn't a lot of things at the time. Tell me how we have a mismatch between the sewer and water, Ken. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things going on, and I've spent the first year and a half intensely looking at the sewer systems and issues that we have there. I mean, it should be no surprise to anybody that the infrastructure that's out there is at least 30 years old, and the western side of the village is 50 years old. The sewer treatment plant on the west side of the village is pretty close to its end of useful life based on the system they put in.
Wow.
Needs a lot of upgrades. The plant on the east side at Cedar Creek is in need of upgrades. We have a lot of infrastructure that's taking on water when it rains. That's called I&I, infiltration and inflow. That causes issues in the lines themselves and in the plants themselves. So, we have to have a kind of a holistic plan here of what to do to meet our permit requirements at our treatment plants, as well as DEQ's requirements, which is the state for, containing the flow that gets into those systems and don't allow it to overflow, out into the streets or out into, people's yards or wherever the manholes are. So, so we've got a plan that we've laid out. It involves actually collapsing our plants to the east side and sending all the flow over there from the facilities that are delivering to the Mill Creek plant. And we think in the long run, that's not only going to save us a ton of money that we have to spend as residents to upgrade both plants, but it'll lower our operation costs, our chemical, electricity, manpower, the things it takes to run a plant, and allow us to focus our investment on a long-term location that has the room to grow. It should sustain us for probably another 50 years, if not longer, from everything we see, as far as the space we have. So those plans are in the works right now, and we're going to be talking to the state about those plans, and we got that pretty well under control, I think. We've bypassed a lot of infrastructure that was over-designed on the sewer side, saving us some money there. And then if you look at the water side, it's kind of the inverse of that, where the water system, and we're still analyzing that. So like I said, we spent a lot of time on the sewer this past year. So now we're looking intently at the water. But the water system was kind of designed like a tree, if you can picture a tree. And as the village continued to grow from west to east, they basically just kept extending the water system out into these areas in order to feed them. And when we upgraded the plant in 2000, I think 14, 15, whatever time that was, we doubled the size of the plant. But there was never anything done to the distribution system to assume that water was going to be able to be delivered. So that's what we're analyzing right now. We are pretty sure we're going to need a couple new water tanks, one on the west side probably, as well as one on the east side. Mm-hmm. And there may be some water mains that need to be upsized. The other aspect of this that, we're looking at is where we can provide diversity. So when we had some of these main breaks, where we shot ourselves in the foot, which I'm sure, we can talk about, part of the issues there where we didn't have diverse feeds to backfeed some of these areas. So, when you have a main break, basically you cut off everything downstream of it. There's no loops, right? So, yeah. We're going to be looking at ways to improve the redundancy in the village, and that solves and helps in a lot of different areas. And as part of our year of operations, making sure everything we currently have actually works, which is another issue. We have a lot of valves that don't work. That bit us in the butt in one of these outages that we had. And so we got a lot of money to invest over the next 5 to 7 years to get the infrastructure where it needs to be. And I'll throw in there, on the water side, because people have been talking about this a little bit. One of the main things that drives our usage on water is irrigation, if you can believe it. So, mm-hmm. in the summer months, we almost, I would say probably we double water production because of irrigation.
I've seen the numbers. It's more like 80%. It's very close to double, which is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a lot. And, I've been, and I'm going to continue to try to preach this, that, as a community, we need to find ways to conserve water. If you're watering your yard, do you really need to be watering it 2 hours a day? Is that really what's required? Mm-hmm. What do you need? Is it 15 minutes adequate? Mm-hmm. And I'm challenging POA facilities too. When you go out the west gate and there's water flooding the street, are we over irrigating the landscaping we got in there? Are we over irrigating the tennis courts or anything else we have? So, but we have to, it's in our best interest to get that under control, because that's going to drive, some of these improvements we're looking at right now. And I don't want to spend millions if we don't have to. So,
well, and Ken, you bring up so many great points here. Let me interrupt just for a sec. Part of it, and this is just, finally, I've traveled a little bit outside the United States. Not everybody irrigates with perfectly clear fluorinated water. Mm-hmm. we have pristine water that is fantastic water by any standard. DEQ will tell you that when we do our reports. We have great water. Sure. And we're putting it on the weeds. I mean, literally. And Steve Simpkins, a buddy of mine who owns, I think it's Fat Boys Irrigation, talks about this all the time. You're overwatering. The vast majority of times we're overwatering. And he makes note that, sitting right here on the lake, he said, okay, Dennis, do you want me to take sterile, clean, perfectly chlorinated water and put on your front yard? Or do you want me to take water that's got fish poop on it and spray it on your yard and make your yard greener? And I'm like, never heard it that way before, never thought of it in that fashion. But in my mind, I love the history of the village, and I can see Cooper building out. Okay. Cooper, as I'm talking a minute ago, Cooper finishes Coronado, and they're selling lots of beautiful 90s era homes. They start Balboa. Well, I'm not an engineer by any stretch, but I do know a little bit about garden hoses. And I know that if I take a 1/2-inch garden hose and run to Coronado, and then I leave Coronado with a 3/4 inch, it's not going to get more pressure or more volume. It's just a bigger tube. So you have different objectives. Cooper had the objective of making homes, selling lots, building a city. You have a different objective 50 years later. Your objective is to say, okay, how do we make this monolithic, smart, and economical, right?
Yeah, and you know, nobody would have done it differently, I don't think. You know, I
Really?
mean, it's the way. I don't think so. I mean, I think the way you build out the community is, you know, without knowing the official growth, you know, you're not going to oversize everything out the wazoo and spend millions of dollars, because that same infrastructure now would be that much older, right?
Well,
So
how would you
know,
have engineered something if you didn't know where the east end of the village was going to be, right?
exactly. So, you know, I don't necessarily hold them liable for it. I think, you know, as a community, as we continue to grow, you know, those are things that you take on and you have to resolve in order to make sure you're meeting requirements of the day, you know? So, you know, that's just something we have to do. We have to look at it in the face. We can't ignore it. You know, we can't say, oh, you know, we're not going to touch it. You know, we have to address it.
And maybe it's my naivete. I did not know we were talking about moving 2 sewer plants into one.
Yeah,
Man, but everything on this end, on the west end, everything, the vast majority is gravity fed. And everything on the east end has a pickup pump. Are we going to have to pick up what goes to Cedar and push it all the way back out to the
well, it's interesting. It is picked up a lot by gravity, but it terminates at the Cortez lift station.
Right, I've been there, and it's a hell of a lift station. My
It's
Lord,
a big lift station. So you
lots
know,
of pumps big around as me. Yeah.
well, yeah, and what happened there, and this is how it kind of developed, was, you know, one of the ways that we were going to try to resolve some of the system overflows that were happening upstream of Cortez was to upgrade those pumps, and we replaced them last year with basically the same size pumps that were there.
Right.
And that had started before I got here, so, which was a good thing, because those pumps were probably old and failing. So they put newer pumps in it to keep the thing fairly reliable. But what they didn't do is they didn't leverage the size of the force main leaving that lift station down to the plant. So the pumps that they put in basically couldn't fully utilize that line. So we got looking at, you know, what we could do at that lift station, and the pump sizes that we would need to, you know, make use of that full 16-inch line going to the plant, which helps keep the flow in the system upstream lower. You know, it helps deal with that flow coming in, right?
Sure. So it doesn't be a bottleneck there at the pump station.
Exactly.
The lift station. Yeah.
And when we got looking at those pump sizes, you know, for slightly larger pumps, we realized we could actually pump it all the way to Cedar Creek. And we were like, well, yeah. So we were like, well, you know, if we can do that, you know, and we can get the flow. And so we basically, if we put a lift station at Mill Creek, build a lift station there, and we upsize the pumps at Cortez slightly larger than we would do anyway, we can bypass the plant.
Aren't you talking about a 10-mile pipe all the way out?
It's about 7.5 miles. And
really?
You know, it is. Yeah. But, and that's a lot of work, but, you know, it's interesting. We, you know, when we're taking this bite size is, you know, my guys are very skilled construction workers. I mean, they've laid, you know, some of my more senior people have laid a lot of the pipe that's in the village.
Really?
So, oh yeah, Larry Heffley and you know, Chris Buzzali. I mean, those guys have been around here 30, 40 years. So, you know, they were involved in laying some of this stuff into the ground. So, you know, we're actually developing a team right now. We're going to start with some smaller projects. We're going to run a 6-inch line from the GG lift station that's currently overflowing to, you know, where we have 3 lines coming to the lift station, only one small line coming out. And we're going to run another line, and our guys are going to do that line. And that's about a 1.5 mile line. And then we're going to get all of the processes down. We're going to make sure we got the equipment, and I've been working on that since I got here, you know, and we have one piece of equipment left to get. But when we work through and install that line, it's going to prepare us to actually install that 7.5 mile line going from the Cortez lift station to Cedar Creek. That's my hope. And we'll, you know, that line was estimated at about $1 million a mile if we had to pay somebody to do it, which is still more economical than upgrading the plant, by the way. But my hope is if my team can do it, we can do it for half that, if not less.
I've seen the board. I've seen the board that you have for operations, and I'm not going to ask anybody to look at it or whatever, but you know, you get that this many gallons per minute coming in, this many gallons coming out. Here's the chlorine. And I mean, it literally is an automation board showing how the plant works, the wastewater and the water treatment plant. Amazing. It's a wonderful system. I can see now having 2 of those systems and 2 sets of teams monitoring that 24 hours a day, 365, right? it gets a little old, and putting that into one plant would be more convenient, I can see, right?
Well, and we can incrementally grow the Cedar Creek plant for less than what it would take to upgrade the Mill Creek plant to properly handle the flow. I mean, everything in that plant needs to be upgraded. I mean, every aspect of it is at the point where it needs to be touched. So, when you just look at those costs, I mean, even if we had to spend, $10 million to get the flow over to Cedar Creek, you're still saving $5 to $10 million on not having to upgrade Mill Creek plant.
Really?
I mean,
well,
it could cost $15 to $20 million to upgrade a plant. I mean, it's very expensive.
So you're saying instead of having 4 or 6 really expensive pumps, we have 3 expensive pumps or really expensive pumps that we monitor those, we watch those, we know what's going on there, and we don't have to replicate services, right?
Correct. I mean, if you've been to the sewer plants and you look at what's involved in those plants, I mean, operating one is a lot less expensive than operating 2. Having to upgrade one plant is a lot less expensive than having to upgrade 2 plants. So even pumping everything over there is still more economical at the end of the day than running 2 separate plants.
Wow.
And Cooper would have never done that, because it was working at the time. They weren't having issues probably like we're having today. But longer term for us, it looks like it's the right thing to do. All the analysis and everything that we've looked at, it's the way to go. We have 6 people running the plant. We could probably get away with 4 or 5 after attrition, and so there's a lot of reasons why we need to do this, and that's the path we're going down on the sewer plant. So,
well, let me give people a little higher view here. The area behind Cortez Dam is what we're calling Mill Creek. And we take all the wastewater that comes roughly from the west end, mostly by gravity. We treat it there, and we make sure that it meets the standards. We extract the waste from it. We clean the water. We basically allow the water to go back into the Middle Fork of the Saline River, which is a protected waterway. Is that correct?
Yep.
So in all those pieces, it's a lot of bars to jump. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And the state's going to probably be very happy with the fact that we're looking to do this. The less plants they have to worry about, the better. Same for us. I mean, the less plants we have to worry about, the better.
Well, two things real quick. Number one, for those that don't know, back in the day, everybody knows the POA building is located at, what is that, 700 DeSoto? What is the address?
895, I think.
Yeah, 895, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, at number 0 DeSoto, just outside the gates, the building that Cooper recently tore down, right there by the water fountains, there was a building that on one side, it was a 2-story building, and on one side was the POA at one point, and on the other side was Cooper. Someone would come in and say, I want to sell my lot. I don't want it anymore. They would point and say, go over there and see those people at Cooper. You would come into the other side and go, my water's not running right. And Cooper would point over to the POA and go over there and see those people. So, and it worked. There were some synergies there. But the reason that I'm saying that is that Cooper's job was not making the greatest village ever and maintaining it in the highest form. Cooper's job was to build it and make a city in the middle of nowhere, which is what they did.
Yeah.
And when you look at their criteria, mission accomplished, right? And I get your point. And I appreciate you not, throwing other engineers under the bus. They did the best for what they had at the time based on their criteria, right?
Yeah. And look, there's other cities that are, part of Act 605 was put in place, I think, because other cities have similar challenges. And
let's talk about Act 605. You took my wind out of my sails right there, because I was going right back into that. 10 years ago, I did a great deal of work in West Helena, Arkansas. Super nice people. The Wall Street Journal calls it one of the few places in America that has lost 1,000 people a year for the last 55 years. Let that sink in, people. It was a heavily dominated agri area that needed lots of people to run lots of 40 horsepower tractors to, get the crops in. Well, now we have 220 foot wide tractors that are 1,000 horsepower that we don't need so many people. You get the picture. But I saw, and matter of fact, do you know Dennis Swanberg? I'm sure, or Swanberg from the Arkansas Rural Water Association, I assume, right?
Actually, I don't.
buddy of mine that runs the Rural Water Association, and every year, just for what it's worth, to compare you and let you know what the comparison is, West Memphis, West Helena, Pine Bluff, all the places in the Delta, Perrin, Perryville, all these places, they have a convention where they send their water workers to typically Hot Springs, and it's the Arkansas Rural Water Association. And Dennis told me, this has been, it's been 30 years ago. He told me that they spend at least 3 hours a year teaching remedial math to people that have to calculate the waste flow, the water flow, the parts per million, how much chlorine you put in the water, how you treat the water to put it back out. Not all parts of Arkansas are equal, Ken. Would that be a fair assumption?
Absolutely.
And one of the reasons that we have it's Act 605, which I'm going to ask you to describe in detail, is places like Pine Bluff and Helena and Perrin and Perryville. And these are great places. It's just the scale for waterworks for them is a lot different. Is that fair?
I would think so. I mean, I think, the Act 605, it really revolves around communities not properly funding for the maintenance and upgrades to their systems over the years, and I think the state, realized that if they didn't start enforcing, certain requirements on towns and municipalities or entities such as us, that, they were going to be left holding the bag, having to come in and fix these systems that are failing. So, they put this law in place to require communities to, analyze their systems and determine what needs to happen and make sure that their rates accommodate for those infrastructure improvements. So, which I think across the board, you're going to see this, I mean, we already, talk about water in the lawns. I mean, one of the reasons people water their lawns so much is because our water's so cheap. I mean, and you're going to see rates across the state tied to the 605. They're going to start jumping through the roof because, if they hold these towns accountable, they're going to have to do this. They're not going to have a choice.
Well, if you haven't seen, the reason I bring all this up with Dennis Swarmberg and all these other guys is because the Arkansas Business probably 3 months ago did an in-depth article about the West Memphis water plant that failed, simply failed. They ran out of water. And you're thinking Detroit, no. The pumps failed. They did not adequately fund it. They were the poster child for number 605. They simply weren't funded. Dennis and his guys had to go in, bring emergency equipment partially funded by the state just to get this significant municipality about the size of Hot Springs Village, Helena, Alway, about 10 or 12,000 people, just to get them back up. So, and I know that the lawmakers looked around and went, we probably got 30 to 50 of these at any time, right?
I would imagine it's probably greater than we know. Yeah. But I mean, and here's something that I tell people, 605 is something we have to adhere to. But, as a community, it shouldn't take 605 for us to do the right thing.
Yeah.
If we have problems out there, or we need to accommodate things that are happening, we got to do it. It's really just another, I guess, reason to say that it's got to be done. But we can't just ignore this stuff any longer. I mean, it's been ignored for way too many years. And most of the people that voted for the increase in our rates and stuff realize that, right? And that's why we're doing what we're doing. But it's good to remind everyone that we have this infrastructure that needs to be upgraded and needs to be addressed, and that's what we're trying to do. So.
Well, the problem is, and Randy mentions this, and that is, I turn on the tap, water comes out. Hey, it looks like the system's working fine, right?
Right.
I flush the toilet, it goes away. Hey, everything's working fine. There's a lot of discrepancies in between the bigger pipes, littler pipes, that kind of thing. And I know we need to wrap up here. I want to cover some other things real quick. Apparently, we're having issues at the Balboa Gate. Apparently, people like to tailgate through there, Ken, right?
Yeah, it's kind of been a very interesting thing there, Dennis.
Interesting.
I mean, very interesting. For as long as I've lived here, you anecdotally hear about it. I think it's gotten worse anecdotally because things you hear online or whatever that people are tailgating. And I actually had it happen to me, and I watched how the person did it. It was about time. I'm not in charge of the gates, but I talked to Christy. Talked to compliance, and I said, what can we do? Let me see if my guys, we can come up with some ideas to help correct it. And I would like to point out that, a lot of people talk about enforcement of tailgating. Well, it's not as simple as it sounds. and think about the time constraints. We don't, police are there to protect us and deal with laws. Unless they're able to determine someone is actually trespassing, they would be spending a lot of time, and frankly, to be honest with you, they'd be dealing with a lot of residents who are tailgating. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you why I know that now. And then on the compliance side, you're talking about somebody violating our policy. If they have a right to be in here, if they're a resident, if they're a contractor, somebody called them in, you have to prove that they may have swiped their arm, maybe it registered, maybe it didn't. The gate opened back up, they go through. How do they know? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I swiped what I thought, So, it would take a lot of time that we don't have to try to really enforce what's happening there. So I took the approach is, if we can't justify doing that, then what can we do to make it less convenient to tailgate? Mm-hmm. And that's what we did at Balboa Gate. And interestingly enough, after we did that, guess who complained?
Residents?
Residents. No. Yes. Residents who for years, our friends would come over and follow us in, or they would come and we would scan them in at the gate, or, hey, I forget my card regularly and I have to get into the village and it's so much closer to my home to come in there than going around. And that's what we kind of presumed anyway, that it was mainly residents. But, so if we're serious about, and I'll tell you another reason why this is important, but if we're serious about security, then all of us that are residents here need to ensure we're properly scanning our cards when we come into the gate. It's also critical for my team. If we're going to make a case down the road, and there's reasons for it, for traffic counts and stuff, to finally man one of these other gates, because Balboa used to be manned. Mm-hmm.
It was the end of the village.
Having the data to show that people are coming through the gates is important.
Yeah.
So, if you live here and you're not ensuring that your card is scanning through, and when your card actually scans, you need to do it. You need to do it so that we get accurate counts through all of our unmanned gates. And then the other aspect of this, it was a problem that I think we're working to fix is, a lot of the mapping software directs people to these unmanned gates, depending on where they're coming from. And we're going to work with our JPs and stuff to try to get signs at some of these key locations to tell people, hey, if you're trying to go to the village, go to this address. Mm-hmm. At these locations, all 5 and 7. And there's about 3 or 4 that probably are the highest counts there that cause people to go to the Glazy-Po Gate or Danville mm-hmm. Gate. So we're going to work on. And I've also submitted stuff to Google to try to tell them, hey, these are restricted access. Can you take them off? And if we as any resident can do that, by the way. Really? You can go into Google mapping software under feedback and give them feedback to say, hey, stop putting these gates into as access points to the village. And maybe if they hear about it from enough of us, they'll actually change their software so stop directing people there. But I thought that was interesting. I've been yelled at from residents who don't want to follow the policies to go through those gates. And so that tells me it's working, number one. So what we did is actually working. I don't know if you've been through there since we put up
No.
Oh, you got to go through there. So
the answer is it shouldn't apply to me. It should apply to those people trying to get through behind me until I need those people behind me to be my friends, right?
Something like that. Yeah. So, and again, we kind of assumed that was it. So imagine if we were spending all of our time tracking down residents who are just violating the policies, and are we going to really go after all of them? We could, but my hope is that people will start to adhere to our policies and some of the measures we put in place, which didn't cost very much, will help convince them that that's what they need to do. So
very clearly. Well, and I want to tell you, Diane and I were coming out of the Great Smoky National Forest. We came out, we drove across a beautiful bridge, beautiful rolling creek, and dead ahead of us was a professionally made sign that said, "Your GPS is wrong. This does not take you to the gorge."
Yeah, right.
But it's that kind of thing where, the GPS, once it gets it in its system, it's kind of hard to get that back out, if you know what I mean.
Yep. So we'll see. I don't know if that's going to work with Google, but I think the signs might help if we can get them up there on the side streets off of 5 and 7, where people who think they're going toward us and can get in, realize, hey, we need to go into the main gate. So
just a nosy question, because I know you run these numbers too. We close the east gate at 10 p.m. I get it. Mm-hmm. Traffic drops off after 10 p.m. Yep. Any way we're going to extend those, or is that just where it is?
I don't know. I don't know what Christie's using for the criteria for that.
Yeah,
I haven't really looked into that to understand if we need to open that up more. And look, we pay a lot of money for gate security. Believe it or not, I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Last thing I heard, I thought it was over $500,000. So we pay a lot of money. Yeah, we pay a lot of money for the gate security. So every time we add or we want to increase certain levels of security for things, people got to realize that costs money, like everything else in the world.
As little as 10 years ago, there was a rumor going around that those were all volunteers from the village, and they just volunteered their time 24 hours a day. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't think so. I don't think that's how that works.
No. And we used to, there used to be volunteers that would help man the gates. I remember those days. And, I'm sure there's a lot of good legal reasons why we don't want to do that anymore, and have a professional security company do it. But, we're going to manage it, and I'm going to work with my peers to try to improve, security throughout the village the best way we can for the least amount of money, and we'll see what happens.
Well, one last shout out. You mentioned something I wanted to talk about: compliance. Now, I got news for you. That is the most two-edged sword I've ever seen in my life, and we're going to miss Charlie Brown. I hate to see him leave. December 31st, he's leaving. And I understand. But you talk about a no-win job. Oh my Lord. As my lovely wife would say, you couldn't pay me to do that job. So we sincerely appreciate him doing that job the last few years.
Yeah, and you're probably going to hear this. So this will be a breaking announcement from any the news media that I talk to, and I do consider you that in some respects. Is
news?
Yes, right. You're official. We are not replacing Charlie Brown. Kelly made a decision to actually break his department up into different segments. My team is actually, welcoming the permits and inspections organization under my umbrella.
Cool.
And compliance will actually be moving to the PD department.
Under
their guys.
I can see that. I really can. It's kind of that reorganization that until something happens, you don't know how you would do it any differently until you go, hey, well, that's how we would do it differently, right?
Yeah, and frankly, from everything we hear, it used to be that way.
Really?
Yeah. So we're kind of going, around the wheel, which is not uncommon in a lot of things. So, we both believe, Kelly and I and Chief, that the synergies that we're going to get by moving these organizations under the different umbrellas will help the village and help us achieve our goals. Because I deal with permanent compliance, permanent inspections, weekly on different things. So, we can get better aligned there on our common objectives. And then I think compliance and police is clearly, there's a synergy there that,
Absolutely. because when the compliance officer comes and politely knocks on the door and says, can we talk about, and then the person starts screaming wildly. Yeah, you want to be backed up by the police department, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think we may see a different approach there a little bit too. So, it'll be interesting to see how things go as we change. So.
Yeah, well, Ken, as always, it's a pleasure. I tell you what, next time, we're not going to make it as long. We'll see you in a few weeks, okay?
All right, Dennis. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
Yep, bye.
Thanks for watching and listening to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast starring Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinsideout.com.